Millwall v Sunderland 1979. Millwall in the 70s was not really the place to visit for away fans. Rated number 1 or 2 in most experts' books on football hooligan firms, Millwall would certainly take an exception to Sunderland's high-profile club and fan base, as they were the latest visitors to the Den, as we recall the day's events. Sunderland fan Bob told us. Following Sunderland AFC through the late 1970s was not for the faint-hearted. My most unforgettable away game was our 1979 trip to Millwall. A day marked not only by the football but by intense clashes and a police escort just to make it back. But to understand the day's impact, we need some context. In the 1974-75 season, Sunderland started their campaign at the Den, Millwall's home ground. That season would be unforgettable for Sunderland, with 2 fierce matches against Manchester United that saw 60,000 fans and a promotion bid that fell agonizingly short. At the time, Millwall wasn't necessarily feared for its crowd trouble, and Sunderland fans travelled to London with high hopes. The Black Cats won 4-1, but the day took a darker turn off the pitch. Some Sunderland fans found themselves in dangerous encounters with Millwall's supporters, enough to prompt some to leave at half-time. By 1978, Millwall's reputation was firmly established. A BBC Panorama documentary spotlighted their notorious groups, including the Halfway Liners, Treatment, and the infamous F Troop, led by the legendary figure Harry the Dog. These groups cemented Millwall's fearsome status, and by the time Sunderland returned in 1979, we knew we were in for a different experience. Tabikina Banatit. The journey begins. 1979 was a turbulent year in England. The country had just endured the winter of discontent, and the nation's financial troubles were still fresh. Margaret Thatcher would soon take office, ushering in a new era. In these challenging times, following Sunderland meant being part of a loyal, dedicated group, no matter the obstacles. We'd been through quite a few chaotic away games recently, including trips to West Ham, and a memorable 4-1 victory at Newcastle United that became infamous for the Battle of Bath Lane. Despite the risks, we signed up with the travel club and set off to the Den with just 22 of us on board. The usual red and white clad groups from Chester-le Street, Ferryhill, and other towns were represented. By the time we reached London, we'd learned that most Sunderland fans had gathered at the Euston Tavern, so we headed there too. Arriving at the Den, around 2:15 p.m, our group of about 300 Sunderland fans left the packed pub and made our way to the Tube. As we travelled, Millwall fans tried boarding at stops like Shadwell and Rotherhithe, but our group blocked them at each door. By the time we reached New Cross Gate, Tube windows were smashed, and sand, meant as a fire suppressant, had been repurposed as makeshift ammunition. Once above ground, we were greeted by the police, with dogs, horses, and vans lining the street. They escorted us toward the ground, and it wasn't long before a few Millwall fans charged us, grabbing whatever they could, bricks, sand, to hurl in our direction. It was a surreal moment. At just 17, I remember thinking at least a nearby hospital sign offered some comfort. Inside the ground, game and confrontations. Finally, we reached the stadium around 3:20 p.m, and a roar erupted as Millwall's fans spotted us entering. The first half was an uneventful 0-0, but the tension was palpable. Halfway through, things heated up. Millwall supporters gathered to taunt us, some even placing children on their shoulders while they hurled insults. At one point, a Millwall fan attempted to climb the fence separating us, only to be met with a well-timed headbutt from one of our lads, sending him flying. That led to more Millwall attempting to climb the fence. Some made it over, but were beaten by some seriously big Sunderland bloke. More Millwall arrived and tried to scale the fence, but police reinforcements arrived just in time and stood between Millwall and the fence. You could feel the evil from where I stood. In the second half, Wayne Entwistle broke the deadlock and Sunderland held the 1-0 lead to the end. But my mind was less on the score than what was waiting outside. The aftermath. After the final whistle, Sunderland fans sat down in the terraces, sensing that we'd be safer staying put. Within minutes, bricks and bottles began pelting the metal fencing behind us, and we could hear the police clashing with Millwall fans outside. We were held in the ground for nearly an hour, finally escorted along the back of the main stand and down to Cold Blow Lane. Even at the bottom of Cold Blow Lane, as we walked towards New Cross Station, Millwall fans lingered. Police flushed out a large group of them, waiting to ambush us beneath a block of flats. The eerie walk continued onto the platform as we awaited the tube, our senses on high alert for any new threats. Heading home. By the time we reached King's Cross, the travel club bus had left, and with little money, we had to arrange travel warrants at the local police station. I remember the officer calling my father, urging him to stay calm as he explained the situation. Finally, we boarded the mail train, arriving home around 6 a.m. The 22 fans on the travel club bus had dwindled to 11 by the time we made it back, and when we later complained to SAFC, we were offered a free trip to Eastville, Bristol Rovers' old ground, as compensation. Reflections. This was life on the road with Sunderland during the 70s. These stories aren't glorified. They capture how things really were. England was changing, culturally and politically, and so was the football scene. Punk rock, skinheads, ska, and the emergence of bands like The Jam and Gary Newman gave the era a raw, rebellious energy. Following Sunderland back then was a badge of honor, a lifetime commitment that I wouldn't have traded for anything. This day at Millwall is just one of many stories that will stay with me forever. It's a reminder of the passion, the intensity and the loyalty of Sunderland fans, an experience no one can take away. Millwall fan Dave told us Sunderland at the Den would have been massive for us that season, as we had already played their northeast rivals Newcastle, who bought about 500 but were readily dealt with. We also had some fans visit from Stoke, Sheffield and Cardiff, but none of them bought many and were no threat. I remember thinking this could be interesting if Sunderland bring a few. They did bring about 500, I think. I mean, it's not a standout encounter, like West Ham or Man United, is it? But it will do for an 18-year-old bushwhacker. I remember we stormed into them as they arrived out of the New Crossgate tube station, as was our usual tactic, as now and then, this would be enough to turn visitors back onto the tube and back home. Some Sunderland did leg it, I remember, but most stayed probably because they thought the police escort could manage them safely to the ground, which they did all in all. We tried breaking the escort, but the old Bill stood firm for once. Inside the ground there were several attempts to get into the section, but the old Bill and the fence came to their rescue. I can't remember much else about the match other than at the end, we was waiting for them to exit a long time, probably 45 minutes. This was unusual. Most away fans were led out straight away, but because they still had around 500 left, the police held them in. Once out, we attacked with every missile you could think of, but as usual, it turned into a running battle with the police. We had an ambush set up that they rumbled, so that avenue was closed off. I think Sunderland were very lucky that day. If it weren't for the old Bill, they would have perished for sure. But at least we had West Ham still to visit that year. But that's a story for another day. We thank Bob and Dave for their recollections of the day's events. It's clear Sunderland did have quite a following for a Millwall game, and it's equally clear the London police did an excellent job of keeping them from the Millwall bushwhacker hordes. Don't forget to share, like and subscribe, as it really helps our channel grow.